Greetings all. Welcome back to part 2 of our history of the Belgian military. We have relocated. We are now at the Bastogne Barracks in, oddly enough, Bastogne. And with me again is Mr. William Testaert of the War Heritage Institute. So we left off just, shall we say, in the interwar period. Now, basically the common knowledge of what the Belgian army got up to in World War II is 1940, the Germans attack, the Belgians put up a defense, they kind of get punched through at the Ardennes and they go to Sedan. Eben Emael falls, and Belgium surrenders. And that's pretty much as far as the common perception goes. Is this an accurate perception?
It's an oversimplification.
All right. Educate us.
Well, actually, we stood our ground for 18 days with difficulties. We had to pull back all the time because the French and the British were pulling back too. Like I explained to you when we saw the T-13, we had a very good defensive system, but it was, of course, not really adapted to modern warfare with the Stuka and all of the Panzer divisions. But the Belgian army put up a good fight, even at the river Lys, like we say in English. They stood their ground, halted the Germans for a couple of days, pulled back in order, and after 18 days, seeing that the British were going back and the French were giving up, the king of the Belgians decided not to have his army butchered, and so he decided to surrender in good order. And so the Belgian army was under full control when it surrendered to the Germans.
Did any units attempt to escape to the UK, like let's say the Poles or some of the French, or did they simply follow orders and lay down arms?
Well, we had units in France under orders. They were schools, military schools mostly. They were relocated in southern France, but the units kept to their orders. Of course, some individuals did not and fled to Great Britain. Some fled to France, to Gibraltar, via Spain to Gibraltar, and so to Great Britain. And so we reformed a very small brigade, which was called La Brigade Piron, the name of its commander, Colonel Piron.
So we saw at the Brussels Museum also, like Belgian Spitfires, so presumably they fought in the Battle of Britain or onwards?
Yes, we had pilots, Spitfire pilots and Typhoon pilots. They were pretty good. Not too much, but I think we had 2 squadrons. And the names of these squadrons, the numbers of these squadrons are still in use today.
And the Navy?
The Navy had a section. We had 2 corvettes and mainly minesweepers.
So Belgian Brigade is reformed in presumably the UK, and they're given British equipment, American equipment. Where do they get their stuff?
Well, the first garrison was Stenby, and it was an infantry heavy brigade, but the organization was a little bit special. So they had a reconnaissance squadron, first on Guys, then on Humbers, later Daimler, and 3 infantry companies, but these companies were totally independent. So they had their own reconnaissance squad section. They had infantry of the lines, of course, anti-tank and logistics, all in one company. So the companies could be engaged independently whenever needed. They were very mobile on the famous universal carriers. There was an artillery battery on 25-pounders, manned mainly by people from the Great Duchy of Luxembourg, and logistic trained in command.
So they came into France after the Normandy invasion fairly early, or did they? When did Belgian troops return to the continent?
There was a standing order for the British Army not to allow foreign troops to do the landings itself. So except for a few exceptions, 2 officers, I think, were the first part of the landing, but with British units. Foreign units were not allowed to execute the landing. So the Belgian Brigade came about in La Romanche in about August.
Okay. And what route did they take then?
Well, they had to wait in the staging area for some time, and then actually the squadron was sent to the 6th Airborne, the British 6th Airborne Division. It was the only armor the 6th Airborne Division had, whereas the rest of the brigade went up to Côte-Fleury, Deauville, Trouville, Honfleur, and these things. If you go to Deauville, there is a Pont des Belges. There is a bridge of the Belgians, because the Belgians were there to liberate the Côte-Fleury. When they reached Honfleur, the armored car squadron was ordered back to the brigade. They went back to a staging area, and there they got orders to do at any cost to drive as fast as possible to Brussels. and they were given the honor to be the first unit. The Belgians had the honor to liberate their capital.
So after Belgium was liberated, did the Belgian army continue into Netherlands or into Germany?
Yes. After some rest and recreation and reorganization, we were sent to the front again. Enfin, the Belgians were sent to the front again in Holland. So we did fighting in a little bit further on the border of Leopoldsburg, which is pretty much east of our country. We crossed it and then we fought there. It was not really a mobile warfare, it was more trench warfare. And then, when the Germans surrendered, the Belgian army was reformed. Companies became battalions, battalions became regiments, regiments became divisions. And in 1948, we were the first former occupied country to have a full corps in Germany.
So when the Belgian army was transiting Belgium, were the stories of Belgian soldiers liberating their own town and seeing their family or anything like that?
Well, I'm not sure about that. Probably it must have happened, but they were mainly from Brussels going to Louvain and going east. So not everybody had a chance to go home. But what happened was when they reached Brussels, the Queen Mother, who was still residing in Brussels, asked her personnel to write down the names of the people, the soldiers, and she sent dispatchers all over the country with the message, your husband or your son is still alive and is in Belgium, which was a very nice gesture, I think.
So is there a specific battle that is most honored, shall we say, for the World War II campaign?
The battle in Normandy as such is on the battle flag. For the rest, there are some mentions about the battle in Holland, but it was so fast that there was no really head-to-toe battle, heavy battles. Mm-hmm. It was more heavy skirmishes, trying to keep up with the Germans who were actually fleeing. And it was not really heavy battles like the Cobra operation, where the Americans and the British really had to battle it out with the Germans. So we didn't do that in such a degree.
How about Belgian resistance, partisans, things like that? Was there a lot of that compared to, let's say, the French? Or?
Absolutely. Belgian resistance was very active. Even Stalin, after the war, said that he was very much surprised to see so much resistance in the country, because he couldn't envision it. But there was very, 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 very heavy resistance in Belgium, yes. The Walloon part, the Flemish part, equally. Trains exploding, whatever. When the British reached Antwerp, for example, the first German tank was stopped by a Belgian reserve officer who was also an engineer, and he managed to convince Major Dunlap, who was in command of that squadron, to take another route to circumvent German positions, and so they were able to take Antwerp without a fight. So Belgian resistance was extremely present and active, absolutely, yes.
All right, so here we are in Bastogne, so obviously we have to talk about the Battle of the Bulge. Mm-hmm. Mainly viewed as an American event, a little bit of British influence. What did the Belgians do, especially the locals?
Well, the locals suffered quite a lot. But there are maybe two stories which can be interesting. When you see the old film, The Battle of the Bulge, where the Germans tried to reach the fuel dumps from the Americans.
You mean a really bad film?
The really bad film. There was a piece which was quite correct. It was a Belgian Fusilier battalion that made sure that the whole thing exploded. Also here in Bastogne, there is a little unknown story about Miss Shiwi, Lady Shiwi, like we call her nowadays. She was a daughter of Dr. Shiwi, which was a resident doctor here in Bastogne, and by chance she was in Bastogne when the battle raged. She was a trained nurse, but she was half white, half black. So the medical company, which was supposed to support the division, was taken prisoner by the Germans. And the major who commanded that, with the remnants of what he had, tried to do his best. So he recruited Lady Shiwi. And at first, the American soldiers were very reluctant to be helped by a black person. But then they donned her an American uniform, jumped into an American Dodge truck, and she went to the battle lines. And with this measure, she retrieved lots of wounded people. And that spread around of this black lady in the battle lines. And so the American soldiers accepted to be treated by her. After the battle, she simply disappeared. She went to her business again. Nobody ever heard of it. Till Mr. Ambrose, the writer of Band of Brothers, found her back residing in an elderly home in Brussels. And the commander of the Bastogne Brigade, when he came here in Bastogne, was ordered by the president to deliver her the presidential citation.
Bastogne Brigade of
The 101st Airborne.
101st, okay.
And so I was tasked to find her and organize a ceremony. And it was done at Royal Army Museum in Brussels because she was 90 years old. And she received a presidential order citation by this colonel. And I must say, a female 4-star Air Force American general, which was a nice touch.
So, I mean, the other thing is you see around here in Bastogne particularly, and you don't see it very often, is the amount of American militaria. So there's a Sherman in McAuliffe Square. All the roads coming in, there's a Sherman turret. Mm-hmm. We were out having a beer last night in a place called the Nuts Bar. And they had like airborne beer and patent beer. That's very specific to Bastogne, right? I mean, this isn't nationwide.
No, this is specific to Bastogne. If an American comes to Bastogne, he pretty much is at home here. So the Americans are very welcome here, and of course, over the years we have tourists coming in, and then of course somebody tries to add a little flavor to it. So we have these Bastogne beers. The first beer, the nuts beer, I think you call it, that's an original one because there is a story behind it. The patent beer, I think, is a local brewery who came up with that idea.
Gotcha. Okay. Anything else you want to put out about maybe this facility in particular that we haven't covered before, or just Belgian history in World War II?
This is the historical place where McAuliffe had his headquarters. So I don't know of many museums that are really located in the center of history. Mm. And that is what you have here. Some parts are still under development, but here the War Heritage Institute has a very dedicated team of military personnel. And I invite you to come. Americans who came here years ago will be surprised with what they will find here.
Right. Okay, well, we'll call it quits then for World War II Belgium. We've got one more coming, and again, we'll be back with Mr. Testaert for the Cold War, and you'll see that in a while. Hope you found this one interesting and informative. See you on the next one.